What's up, everybody? This is Whiskey in the Six. I'm Rob. Today, a group of us got together and opened up this beautiful bottle that I've been waiting a long time to open up in honor of my grandfather who passed away a few weeks ago. So, like I said, there's never the opportune time to open up a valued bottle, but I guess what better than when with friends celebrating the life of a great person, right? So anyway, Canadian Club 30-year-old. All right, like I said, I waited a long time to open this. I probably had this in my possession for about 5 years. I'm gonna pour a glass. This way we can get started on letting it sit for a little bit in the glass. And then I'll start talking about this particular whiskey. A lot of people ask me before we get started, when's a good time to open up a bottle? I want to save this for a special occasion. What I find ends up happening is the special occasion comes and goes and you still feel guilty to open that bottle. Part of the reason I started this channel, Whiskey in the Six, is because I had a bunch of bottles that I wanted to try and I wanted to remember those moments, and what better way to do that than to record them. So my wedding came and went, didn't open this. My son's birth came and went, didn't open this. So like I said, we decided to honor my grandfather by opening this. If you have bottles that you're saving and you plan on opening them as opposed to saving them for the increase in value and trading them later on, I recommend you open them. Find an occasion when you're with the right people, the people that you would like to share with, and open it up, because too often in life things happen where you can't enjoy them with all the people that you want to enjoy them with. Okay, so anyway, that's my little spiel about that. On to this. I had an opportunity to interview the ambassador of Canadian Club, who is a fantastic guy, Dan Tulio. Thank you very much if you're watching. He gave me a bunch of information on this particular bottle, the Canadian Club 30-year-old. This is the 150th year anniversary. Canadian Club was founded in 1858. This bottle was bottled in 2008. Okay, it's, like I said, 30 years old. So, some of the questions I asked, I'm just going to read off the notes that I took, just because this was all through email. I don't want to read it off verbatim, so I'll just kind of quickly go through what I know about it, thanks to Dan Tulio. I asked about the aging process, and he said, first of all, the whiskey is a combination of corn, rye, and malted barley. So the difference between rye and malted rye is when the rye grain is harvested, you get the little buds or beads or, the grain, basically the small little dry grain. Those are crushed and distilled. For them to be malted, they have to germinate, so they have to sprout and then be distilled. All the single malt barley whiskeys, all your single malt scotches, they are all from malted barley, so sprouted barley, okay? When a grain like barley or rye are not malted, they're way more difficult to deal with in the distilling process. But the advantage to using a regular rye that hasn't been malted, is it gives it a different taste that you're not used to, okay? So that's the first thing. The second thing is they are those the four grains, so the corn, the rye, and the barley, and the malted rye, okay, not technically 4 grains, but 4 different types of distillates. They're blended prior to barreling, okay? That's a unique thing with Canadian whiskey. Most Canadian whiskeys barrel blend after they've been barreled and aged, okay? So they barrel their rye exclusively, they barrel their barley exclusively, then they'll age them for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever it is, and then blend it according to taste after it's been aged. Okay, some even younger than others. Okay, this, and Canadian Club does this with all of their selection. Different recipes for each, different measurements of the rye and the barley and the corn for each, but they blend them and barrel them and say, okay, these are for this allotment of barrels are for the 9-year-old. This allotment of barrels are for the 12-year-old. This allotment of barrels are now for the 30-year-old. They're aged in American white oak casks. Okay, the warehouse, in order to keep consistency and maturation, is heated during the winter months. That gives the whiskey the opportunity to be consistent in the way it's aged throughout the year. Okay, like roughly around the same temperature. I'm not sure if they have a various, like maybe within 5 degrees or so. Okay, so like I said, it's a heated warehouse so that during the summer months and the winter months there's not a drastic difference in temperature. It gives a consistent maturation process. All right, that's question 1. Question 2, how many bottles? All right, this was a limited release. It is no longer available in Ontario, no longer available in most provinces in Canada. I'm not sure about the territories, but I doubt it's available there as well. Very few places in the States have it, if any. Okay, you might find that one mom and pop type shop, whiskey distributor that has a dusty bottle that nobody found or nobody knew about. Okay, but it's nearly impossible to find. Okay, opening this bottle up, it's worth way more than what I originally bought it for. I originally bought it for $180 Canadian. I know of a few bottles going in the States for about $450 to $650, maybe even $700 American. That would be close to $1,000 Canadian if they went for $700, right? That's because some people are willing to pay more for a rare product. I bet you in an auction, like I said, this would probably at least minimum go for $400 American. Okay, so it's very hard to find, and it's likely to be very expensive if you do find it. Okay, there were, again back to question 2, 200 bottles put away, all right, stored away, and 50 of those bottles 30 years later, barrels, sorry, I said bottles, but I meant barrels. 50 of those barrels 30 years after aging for 30 years were used for the 2008 bottling of the 150th year anniversary 30-year-old. Okay, approximately 18,000 bottles, 750 milliliters. They didn't do any miniatures, they didn't do any half bottles, they didn't do any samples. It was 18,000 roughly of the 750 milliliter bottles. Okay, that would be, I believe, 75 CL if you're in the UK. Yeah, so that's question 2. Question 3 was straightforward. Will this be released again? And he gave a definite no. Okay, so there will not be another 30-year-old. There definitely can't be another 150th year anniversary released because, of course, we're well beyond that by this point. It was 2008, so we're 8 years beyond that. And he said it won't be released. So I'm not sure if he meant the 150th year anniversary won't be released. That's quite obvious, and I'm pretty sure he didn't mean that. I think he meant that the 30-year-old won't be released. That's not to say that they used the other, there's another 150 barrels that are unaccounted for, or they've already been used. I'm not sure, he wasn't clear there. So maybe with those 150 they plan on doing every decade from now on. I'm not sure, so maybe in a few years we'll find a 40-year-old version. I'm not sure, but I'm excited and I hope so. Anyway, I, like I said, had a chance to try this with some family and I was overly impressed. Okay, the bottle is quite nice. If you know anything about the Prohibition era, you know that Canadian Club was very popular during that time. And the reason for that being was alcohol was illegal in the United States. It was legal in Canada. Canadian Club being close to Windsor at Walkerville, Ontario, which is close to Windsor, which means it's pretty close to Detroit, is almost bordering an American city, thus easy access to run barrels of Canadian Club or bottles of Canadian Club to the United States. All right. Early on, when Canadian Club had a different name, it was going by a different name. It was still very popular, being bought quite often in the United States. A lot of American distilleries thought that if there was a law passed where Canadian whiskeys had to state that they were Canadian whiskeys, Americans would opt to buy more American whiskey. The law was passed, and it turned out that the Canadian whiskeys went up in sales. Okay, so people really gravitated towards Canadian whiskey in the United States, and I believe that's stayed true today. There's still a big fan base in Texas, I think, in particular, that love Canadian whiskey. This bottle came with this lovely case. Okay, nice velvet bed. Okay, it's just cardboard, but it's still pretty nice. It's got the latch on the side. All right, we got the book right over here, and it goes through some of the history of Canadian Club. All right, has some nice pictures and information. Okay, it talks about how Canadian whiskey can be bottled after 3 years of aging in barrels. Canadian Club wasn't fond of barreling or bottling their whiskey at 3 years. They insisted on doing at least 5, up to 7 for their baseline bottles, their baseline bottling. So they're aging for 5 to 7 years in white oak barrels at minimum. Okay. Anyway, I think we've spoken enough to the actual history of this bottle. I'm gonna give it a shot. Like I said, I've had an opportunity to try it earlier. Let's see if anything's changed after the bottle being open for a little bit. Okay. One other thing I will mention before I do get started, I'm sorry for those of you who are anxiously waiting, but with older bottles, if you've kept a bottle for a long time, okay, ensure that you stand it upright, always, okay? And the reason for that is the cork, and I've had this only for about 5 years, but it probably sat in LCBO who knows how long on its side, who knows. But the cork starts to deteriorate a little bit, and you'll find some of the residue along the mouth of the bottle. That's okay as long as most of it doesn't get into the actual whiskey. All right, so it might happen, it might not, but if that does happen, if you do end up getting some residue into the actual whiskey from the cork, in order to avoid cork damage, because sometimes the cork will actually break off, so in order to avoid cork damage, I would suggest you strain it into a whiskey decanter, something like this. Here, my trusty Toronto Maple Leaf whiskey decanter. Okay, strain it and let it go into the whiskey decanter. At least this way you know that the cork won't damage the actual whiskey. All right. And when I was talking about regular tumblers the other day, I could have just reached back and picked up one of these because this is just a basic whiskey tumbler. Okay. Anyway, on the nose. Okay, you get sweet baked rye bread. Okay, if you know anybody, if you buy rye bread, if you bake rye bread yourself, you'll get that smell of sweet baked rye bread. It's very pleasant. Okay, there's caramel in there. There's a touch of oak. It's not as oaky as you would think for a 30-year-old, which I don't mind. There's some heat there, a little bit of white pepper maybe. Get some maple, okay? I want to say maple fudge. And like in the background, maybe some orange marmalade. Okay, on the palate. Okay, this is ridiculously smooth. Has a nice warmth to it. Not sharp at all. Doesn't do any damage to the tongue. It's really sweet on the first sip. Okay, that maple carries through. It's like a maple syrup almost now. On the nose, it's like a maple fudge, but because of the velvetyness of the actual whiskey, you get that like maple syrup texture and taste. Okay, definitely some caramel. I'm picking up a touch of coconut. It's so sweet that it almost gives you like a rum feel to it, like a rum cake or a rum raisin, something like that. I would say rum cake, like a baked good with some rum. Very sweet. The smells, like there's cinnamon there, there's clove. It reminds me of Christmas. The smell of it, even a little bit of the taste of it, it reminds me of something that I would have on a really cold day. It's a feel-good whiskey. You can have this by a fireplace. You can have this with a cigar. You can have this to warm you up on a cold day. It's really, really good stuff. It's shocking how smooth that is. Almost zero alcohol burn. If you had an opportunity to try the 20-year-old, I highly recommend it. The 20-year-old is about $65. Back when it was $50, I bought a ton of it. It's a fantastic dram. And this is the difference between Canadian whiskey and a Scotch or even a bourbon. We're talking $50 Canadian or $65 now Canadian for a 20-year-old whiskey. So Canadian Club doesn't overcharge for their whiskeys, okay? They put a lot of time and effort into their whiskey, but because of their history, because of the success they've had, they can afford to charge a little bit less, okay? This is bottled at 40%, okay? It doesn't mention whether or not it's unchill filtered, and it doesn't mention whether or not there's been added color. I would imagine at 30 years, they wouldn't have to add too much color, unless of course it was a virgin oak cask, then they might have to add a little bit of color, but I'm not picking up any of that on the palate. There's no E150 signature taste. It's very rare that you will get that taste from the E150 caramel color, not caramel taste, but I'm not getting any of that here. There's no harshness, there's no off-putting tastes at all. This is fantastic stuff. I'm gonna give this a solid A, guys. Once again, I want to thank Dan Tullio for the opportunity and for the information that he gave me. I might have an opportunity he offered, and I did accept. So hopefully all goes well. In early July, I will be going down to the Canadian Club Distillery, doing a few of the Canadian Club line. Maybe I think for sure we're gonna do the 100% rye, because that's fantastic stuff, and possibly a couple others, I'm not sure, and then maybe a tour as well. So hopefully I can get most of that on video, and I'll post those videos when the time comes. So I think it's gonna be in early July. So I look forward to that, and hopefully you guys do too. Thank you for watching. If you are able to find a bottle, or if you have a bottle of this unopened, sealed, whatever, I'd be interested. So write a comment below. I would like to keep one for a long time, just to have, now that this one's open. If you can get your hands on a bottle and you don't plan on selling it to me, that's cool, I understand. You should definitely give it a try, because it's fantastic stuff and it's no longer available. 18,000 bottles went pretty quick. Okay, it was 8 years ago that it was bottled and sold, but I mean, it's been sold out of the LCBO for at least 5 years that I can recall. I think I actually got the last bottle because there was one available in one of the northern cities in Ontario, at least 5 or 6 hours away, and from Toronto, that is. And my friend who works at the LCBO was able to ship it to his LCBO and buy it for me, and then I gave him the money, of course. But really good stuff. If you can grab it, grab it. I'm on Twitter and Instagram, at Whisky_in_the6 on Instagram, and at Whisky_in_the_6 on Twitter. Cheers, guys. Thank you.